Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Program.
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukesshow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. How are you on this lovely Monday morning? Are you ready? Are you ready for the week? Are you ready to pick up and get things moving? Oh, man, I tell you what, it's an exciting day in paradise, and what a beautiful weekend for those of us anyway down here on top of the world in Homer, and I hope in your part of the world as well. As it was it was a great time. Got a great chance to go out into the community this week. On Saturday, we had the big winter carnival parade in Homer. And by big, I mean in Homer standards here. By Homer standards, it was big. Big turnout, lots of folks, lots of parades, lots of floats, had a good time. Chris Story and I emceed the event, and it was a great day. Lots of beautiful sunshine. And got a chance to engage with the community and just just have a good time. It was, well, I mean, I don't mean to be too poetic, but it was a little magical. It was a little magical to be able to enjoy being part of the community like that, and hanging out and seeing all the folks, and just a great thing to do on a beautiful. It's not spring yet, but boy, it feels like being down here. It kind of feels like a spring weekend. Current temperature is about 30 degrees. We're seeing 5 degrees up in the valley, and a little crisp and cold up in Fairbanks here this morning, according to the chat room. -9 below up in Fairbanks. So, but hey, at least it's not 50 below, right? At least it's not 50 below in Fairbanks, which it very well could be here in the middle of February in Fairbanks. So we're doing okay. What do we got? We have got a lot of headlines to talk about today, and the discussion just continues. On Friday, there were some surprising developments, which we're going to get into here in just a little bit, and I'm sure we will probably have a lot more discussions on this tomorrow with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who's going to come in for the weekly top 3. It's going to be it's going to be an interesting year. Let's say that. We'll talk about the president's announcement about Japan and the Alaska LNG project. I know a lot of people are very excited about it. I am, well, let's just say I am cautiously, no, I'm not, I can't say I'm cautiously optimistic. I guess I'm kind of neutral. I'm hovering between hopeful and dubious at the same time. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm hopeful and dubious all at once, which is a kind of a conundrum, I guess we'll say here. We'll get into that as well. Some of the latest from what's happening down on the Kenai as well. We've got the breakdown of the student scoring in the NEAP, the National Education Assessment. And that should be some interesting stuff. And this is kind of the things that nobody in the school system really wants us to talk about. So I've kind of decided that we need to focus on it, because if they don't want to talk about it, and we've seen a lot of that rhetoric come out of the pro education side, is that they want to talk a lot about the lack of school funding, although there hasn't been a lack. Again, that's kind of a misnomer, but they want to talk about the lack of school fund, but they want to talk nothing about achievements or outcomes or how good the product is that they are supposedly developing for us, the parents of these students. So it should be an interesting topic. We also have, of course, the latest on that plane crash in Western Alaska, which claimed the lives of 10 people. We're going to talk about the permanent fund, the pay raises for the legislature, which be honest with you, I'm still kind of scratching my head over. I'm still kind of scratching my head over the recommendation from the State Officers Compensation Commission on that one. We're going to have a talk about that. A new bill co-sponsored by Congressman Begich that has to do with Social Security. I mean, we all heard about how Nick Begich was going to end Social Security. And what's this deal now that I'm seeing? I was watching YouTube this weekend. I know, it was so funny. I haven't been on YouTube in so long. My wife and I were laughing because when I went to the YouTube on my television, because we have a YouTube app on the TV, when I went there, there was only one bar of recommendations. I mean, it's been so long since I've logged into YouTube because I've been busy around here, that all the other stuff that I would normally see it was gone. It was like, you've been gone. We can only recommend this for you because we don't know what you want to watch. But it was interesting because I was watching a couple videos, and in just the 2 or 3 videos that I watched, which may have been 30 minutes worth of YouTube this weekend, I saw this anti-Nick Begich ad put out by the Senate Majority Forward. Was that it? Or Congressional Majority Forward? Some kind of PAC was putting on this ad. And it was going on about how, Nick Begich has literally been in office for 6 weeks. And they've already got this ad up there talking about how he needs to not support RFK Jr. as a nominee, which I'm wondering if that ship has already sailed. And then he is working with RFK, who would be the health and social, who would be the head of the health thing. And somehow he and RFK Jr. are working together on some kind of sales tax, national sales tax. That's the linkage in the commercial. Maybe somebody in the chat room can explain it to me, because I was like, what? And I saw this ad probably 4 or 5 times in 30 minutes. And I was trying to figure out what exactly they're trying to, they're spending some money on it, because it was in any potential commercial ad break that YouTube could throw at me. It was out there. And so maybe somebody who's smarter than I am can explain to me exactly what that means, what's going on with that. Anyway, Nick Begich has co-sponsored a bill that will help you if you got some Social Security coming in. Although, again, Mary Peltola, remember, she said that he was going to end Social Security. What else we got? Alaska Doge, a presidential executive order on Friday dealing with the Second Amendment, a little Firearms Friday executive action. Yeah, I wish it had happened a little earlier, but it didn't. That's okay. We're going to get to that. And then more discussion on school districts and their long-term budget issues and more. I do have this story, and I don't know how to feel about it. Let's see how much time we got. Maybe I should start with this one, because I don't know. I know this is business as usual. I know this is how business is done these days. And I guess my question is it how it should be done? And what I'm talking about is a story in the Peninsula Clarion. Jacob Dye writes for the Peninsula Clarion. And the story reads, Kenai adds funds and authorizes contract for study of emergency services facility. So the whole story is based around the decision from the Kenai City Council last week, where they agreed to spend unanimously. They agreed to spend $172,000 to assess a business, I guess, based in Kenai or Soldotna, which I guess is good. That's the good part, I guess, is that it was based in Soldotna. But they are directing funds to assess the Kenai Emergency Services Facility. Now, this could be happening in any town, Alaska, right? It's not just a Kenai issue. But what I thought was interesting, the whole thing was the police chief in the area has basically said that Kenai's police and fire departments have not kept up with the needs of the community. Basically, it was constructed 50 years ago. And since that time, the population of the city of Kenai itself has doubled. It's up around 8,000 people now in the city itself, not the borough, but the city. And in that same time, the number of police officers has over doubled. It went from 8 to 18, and fire personnel almost doubled. It went from 11 to 19. They said that the building faces significant heating, storage, and security issues. They say none of the issues are urgent, but they're all adding up over time. And they've got issues with storing police evidence, the fire department living quarters, and they've got an aging roof. Okay, so all problems for a building that's 50 years old. So this year's budget at the city included $150,000 for evaluating the needs of both departments and to evaluate the condition of the facility and to explore actions and basically deliver recommendations. And here's here's my conundrum. Okay. I look at this. Now, they didn't have enough because they needed more. 150 wasn't enough to cover the 172,000 and change or whatever. So they took $60,000 from a project that they had previously approved back in June of last year to replace the flooring in the fire department, $60,000. And they said, the facility's looking at some significant issues that have, should we complete those repairs of the flooring, or if it's not going to meet our current needs and needs, they have to build a new one, shouldn't they do? So that part makes sense. I guess this is my question. Do we really need to spend, and I'm sure this $172,000 in change is just a drop in the bucket. Do we really need to spend $172,000 to decide whether or not we should maintain, upkeep, or replace a building? And I don't have an answer for this. My initial reaction is, man, shouldn't that be a recommendation of the heads of those departments? Although I know how ironically naive that sounds, because we know that many times in government, those that would be benefiting from something like that they're more than likely to say, yes, we need a new building. I don't know if there's a better answer than what they're doing, but it just seems like to spend $170,000 plus, and I'm sure this is not the only study that will go into this, but $170,000 plus to decide what to do with your facilities. It just seems like, I don't know. It seems a little wasteful. Now, I'm sure that there's some expert somewhere that will tell you that they're an expert in efficiency on emergency services and they can help you make a better building or whatever. I mean, and I'm sure that the sciences have changed over the last 50 years since they built the building, and there's probably more efficient workflow. But I guess I just scratch my head at the fact that they're going to spend $172,000 to decide what to do. They know something needs to be done. Either they're going to have to replace the facility, which will be millions of dollars, or they'll have to upgrade and maintain the facility, which will also be millions of dollars. I just don't know that you need to spend $172,000 to decide which one of those choices to take. But again, I'm not a construction guy. I'm not an EMS or fire guy or anything else. And again, it's not just this. I'm not speaking specifically just to this one type of building or anything else. It's just, it goes back to what my friend John calls the Alaska study industry. We've got funds for a study to see if we should do something moving forward. We know we should do something. I guess I'm just asking why we have to spend, $175,000-$200,000 to decide in which way we should move forward. Maybe it goes back to that whole trust the experts thing, which, it's not that you shouldn't consult experts, but I don't have an answer for this. This is one of those stories that just kind of makes me, I feel a certain way when I read it and I look at it and I think about it and I go, I don't have an answer for this, but I know something is not right there. Just, make a decision, fix what you got, or tear it down to start fresh. Want to tear it down, start fresh. All right, we got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, I'm just thinking that maybe we should just I don't know. I don't know. Good morning, good morning, good morning. 23 degrees in Kenai. Oh, Brian, he's living in the Banana Belt today. He's 16 degrees in the Wasilla Fishhook. Meanwhile, Rick across town is at 5 below. Ooh, man. 10 above in Salcha. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Anthony said his K-cup exploded against the ceiling. Well, that's a heck of a way to start a Monday. Let me go. Let's see. Fat Ray's talking about the teachers and the education scores. He says, were I a teacher, I wouldn't want to be held accountable for the results of trying to educate today's youth either. They aren't made to behave, and the parents get militant if discipline is enforced. I'm sure that's a part of the problem. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Joel says Begich is a slaughterhouse. He was on Newsmax the other day, and I've never seen him so on point. Chris says the solution to my problem is to pay a couple of months for premium YouTube, and you don't see the ads anymore. I don't mind seeing the ads. It was just interesting that it was all about that. Okay, well, that makes more sense, Donna. Donna is clarifying it for me. She said Dems all over the country are calling tariffs a national sales tax, which, I mean, it in a way it is, but yeah. The homeschool lawsuit is back, says Rob. Which, oh, yeah, okay, I got it. I remember now. I'm still scrolling through her. Terry says, study the study to study the study. Yeah, that's exactly. A housing inspector, says Anthony, charges around the equivalent of about $100 per hour and takes 2 to 4 hours to fully inspect a home. Explain to me how we're essentially paying someone 150 labor hours to evaluate a 50-year-old building to reach the conclusion it's as old as hell and not worth fixing. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it would seem that, my initial reaction would be, one, can we use the building for something else? Because I'm sure technology, techniques, everything else have changed. I'm sure they're going to be more efficient and they can make it. I mean, it's always, it's to retrofit a new building. It's always going to be a whole new deal. More than likely, they're going to say, that they're going to need a new facility. I mean, it's 50 years old. I'm not saying you tear the building down, but what if we split it? It's police and fire sharing it. What if you gave it to one or the other? Could you then make I don't know. Well, Terry says, use the study money to fix the building. I mean, yeah, that's, oh man. Good morning, good morning, good morning. 31 degrees in Soldovia. 39 in Quinault. All right. What about the 2A executive order, said Jennifer. I mentioned that. I mentioned it. We haven't got there yet, but we're working our way in it. Jeannie says there's a new fire station about a quarter mile away at the Kenai Airport. Well, why are 170,000 to study whether we need another new one? I don't understand. All right, let's continue. Let's continue ahead.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Interesting. Some commentary from the Peanut Gallery here. Some of the commentary from the chat room is interesting. Specifically, Jeannie in the chat room says there's a brand new fire station about a quarter mile away from this building that they're thinking about, that they're spending $172,000 on. There's a brand new fire station about a quarter mile away at the Kenai Airport. But, I think we're all going to find out that the cost of remodeling a building that old to build it up to current specs is probably going to be it's probably going to be cheaper to build a new one. I mean, I hate to say, maybe the building can be used for something else. Maybe they can do whatever. But do they really need to spend $172,000 to decide that? I guess is, I'm just wondering. Do they need to spend? Yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting thought, an interesting discussion. What else we got? So that was the story that just kind of tweaked my brain a little bit this morning as we were getting into it and reading it. There's a lot of new stuff. Authorities are taking a look at the wreckage of that small caravan from Bering Air. That's the small commuter aircraft that went down in the Bering Sea off Nome, killing all 10 people on board on Thursday. They're trying to determine what caused the plane to go down. Crews succeeded finally on Saturday. They discovered the remains on Friday, and they finally were able to recover the wreckage. It was on unstable sea ice. It was on a big drifting ice flow. So it was, I guess we're lucky that it was actually still on the surface. But at the end of the day, they were able to take the wreckage off by helicopter, and they got it over to Nome, and the NTSB is now peeling through it to take a look at everything and find out what was going on. It was a regularly scheduled trip, and it went missing about 30 miles southeast of Nome. It was lost less than an hour after it left Unalakleet on Thursday. The crash is under investigation. According to radar provided by the Civil Air Patrol, the plane rapidly lost elevation and speed, but it's unclear exactly what happened on board. The Coast Guard reported that they were unaware of any distress signals from the plane, and they were trying to figure out exactly what is happening. They did say the plane was flying in an area where moderate icing was possible, which is between the 2,000 and 8,000 foot level. However, the plane had anti-icing systems on its wing and tail and everything else. That'll all be part of the examination. And then, of course, the heartbreaking stories of all of those who were on board the aircraft, including some folks from Anchorage, a longtime educator and mentor from Wasilla, a pair of apparently folks who were going to Unalakleet to work on the heating system, the heat recovery system at the water plant. That's a tough one. And of course, all the folks who were local to the community. And of course, part of a problem here is in Alaska, you got to fly to a lot of places. There are no roads to many of these places. and it makes for a tough time. This is the biggest crash. What did they say? I think this is the one of the deadliest in the state in 25 years, with so many people aboard. Now, technically, air travel is still very safe, as we know, around the country. But it's big things like this, the crash at Reagan International, and more that make us pause and go, huh? Although I think statistically, if I look at the numbers, it's still statistically safer to fly than it is to drive on a major freeway. So you're, I guess one way or the other, you're always taking your life into your own hands. But we'll wait to see what happens here from the NTSB as they report more on what's going to be happening there, and what exactly brought about this major crash. Well, the Trump administration made an interesting announcement on Friday. He answered questions during a news conference with Japan Prime Minister Ishiba at the White House. And he made an interesting comment during that discussion. They started talking about natural gas. And he said on Friday that Japan would soon begin importing record amounts of LNG from Alaska. He said Japan will soon begin importing historic new shipments of clean American liquefied natural gas in record numbers. We're talking about the pipeline in Alaska, which is the closest point of major oil and gas to Japan by far. Less than half the distance of any other location. We're talking about a joint venture of some type between Japan and us, having to do with Alaska oil and gas. Now, Larry Persily, of course, oil and gas analyst, former deputy commissioner of revenue, and all around, dog's body as far as writing opinion pieces and everything else. He says this is all kind of a snow job. He said Japanese companies have studied efforts in Alaska to export North Slope gas and walked away from it in the end. He said this time they'll do that again. He said it costs too much to develop for other options for Japan, and said that British Columbia is not that much further away from Japan than Alaska. And he said Mitsubishi is already an investor in the Kitimat project in BC. He said that his takeaway was that Japan didn't want to get lumped into the tariff threats with Mexico and Canada. And so they'll say, yeah, we'll look at it, that they're just agreeing to agree. We'll see what, he didn't really have much nice to say about the president, but that's Larry Persily. He's always about, the big government spend, but not this one, apparently. Now, this would be a multi-billion-dollar project. The $44 billion, which is that's an older number, by the way. The study phase, the LNG project, is still in the study phase, and that $44 billion is, that was the number that Bill Walker was throwing around, right? Back in 2016. So that number is almost 8 years old. So just look at your grocery bill and tell me where the inflation has risen that $44 billion to. What would it be now? 60 billion, maybe? I don't know. But they keep throwing around this $44 billion number, and it's that's an old number based on anything else. But if the project were to go forward, and let's just say that the federal government picked up the tab completely and then worked it out with Japan later on, it still means that we would not see the first gas exports from the project until 2031. And so, but better to get started now than to wait to get started till later, right? What was that? The tree planted today versus the tree planted in 20 years, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we we pontificated on this possibility last week or week before when we were talking about this, because we'd heard some rumblings about national security and whether or not the federal government might get involved in something like this. And I'm curious to see where it goes. I mean, again, if the president tries to embrace this from a national security perspective, they might be able to sell it from that perspective. But I don't know as the president can just arbitrarily, it's not like he can just take $40 billion from one fund and push it on over to Alaska Gas. He's going to have some cooperation on something like that. And I don't know, quite honestly, how I feel about the federal government taking over. Now, they did this before. They did this during the Inch pipeline, or what do they call the little tiny pipelines that they ran up and down the Alcan? I mean, that was a government project that was being used at the time. But I don't know how to feel about this. It would sure be nice to get Alaska Gas, don't get me wrong. And this might be one of the only ways that it feasibly could happen, because the economics of it doesn't work out for I mean, Larry Persily is not wrong in saying that they've looked at this project before and it just doesn't pencil out. I mean, that's, that totally makes sense. Many people and entities have looked at this and decide that it doesn't pencil out. But do we really want the federal government to pull all? Maybe that's the only answer. I don't, see, today is Monday. Apparently I'm just torn about everything, the study on the fire department building or the gas line or the whatever. It just feels like at every level of our lives, government is so deeply involved that at some point you got to start asking questions like, why does the government need to be involved in every aspect of our life? Maybe that's my major conundrum here. Hey, that's where I'm at. All right, we got to go. We're going to continue here. We got more coming up, including Alaska Doge. Ooh. And the latest from Nick Begich, which sounds pretty darn good. We're going to get back to that here in just a second. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Like what? Is that how you pronounce it? Unalakleet? I've literally been working there and nobody corrected me because I was pronouncing it Unalakleet. I don't know. I was always told Unalakleet, but I don't live there, so I'm gonna do my best. Yeah. Planes do crash a lot here. That's just the biggest one with the most souls on board. That's the biggest problem there. Okay. Rob says, until Japan signs a 20-year contract to buy gas, I won't hold my breath. No. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. 100%. 100%. I'll just wait right here while that, we'll see. The last time we talked to Japanese about buying our LNG project, they bought an equity stake in an Australian LNG. I remember that. I remember that he was so excited. Walker was so excited about that, and then they turned around and bought into, was it Santos, or I forgot which project they bought into, but yeah, that was the slap in the face right there. That was the slap in the face. For sure. Larry, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can, said Chris. Oh man. Interesting. The Canol pipeline, says Brian, we're still cleaning those up. Yeah, that's the old Canadian inch line or whatever they called it. Let's see. It's okay by me. With the feds help out with the Alaska gas line, they help out with the Parks Highway. Little bit different. This would not be helping out, Randy. This would be a complete and total. They would be the one doing, Bill says, call me stupid, but can't they just strap a gas line to the oil pipeline until it goes underground, then split off and go wherever it needs? Wouldn't that be more economical? If you actually look at the design of the original pipeline, and in fact, you can look at many of the trestles and the bridge crossings, and you could see that there's empty spaces on one side. They originally built it to have a parallel line come down. But yeah, it just never worked out. It just never worked out. It just, too early to spell. Okay. All right. Michael Dukes turns blue. Who changed him from red to blue? What do you mean? Did I get blue? What, did I turn blue? Awesome. Blue with whatever. All right. Well, it looks like I'm all caught up. I'm finally all caught up. It would have been great. That's all good. I'm all done. All right. So what else? What did you guys do this weekend? What did you do? What did you guys do? Mystic Waffle says, I know today's talk is for gas lines, but I'm still waiting for the government to open up coal exports again. That's another large export we miss out on. Docks sit empty in port cities. I mean, I'm with you. We should be exporting Alaska coal. It is one of the cleanest burning coals in the world. I'm with you on that one. I mean, I'm with you on that one, Mystic. Sure would like to see it. I'd sure like us to be able to utilize anything that we can utilize to bring the cost down for Alaskans, including exporting or using it ourselves. I'm definitely in favor of that. But the world is all about coal bad, right? Coal bad. That's what the thing is. Yeah. Oh, I'll be holding my breath. Yeah, that's exactly. I'll be turning blue because I'm holding my breath. See, this is the problem with reading comments not in real time. Let's go over here. Oh, the Alaska Railroad sold all their coal cars, says Kevin. That's a problem. All right. Let's get into it. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y things. Let's get to it. Here we're 5 seconds out. I hate it when my timing is off. Don't you? Yeah.
The Michael Dukes Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. Let's continue on here we've covered the gas story. I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, I'd like to have more details and know exactly what's happening with it, but we'll keep our eye on the prize, so to speak. We'll be watching it to see where it goes from there. All right. What is I guess since we mentioned Larry Persily in the last story, because he's quoted in the story about the Trump and the gas pipeline and everything. And like I said, he doesn't have a lot of great stuff to say about what the president's doing. But Larry Persily is a guy that never saw a government dollar that he didn't want to personally spend, I guess. It's kind of where I'm at. He just is like, nope, he wants to use it. He wants to spend it. And the latest is an opinion piece from the Peninsula Clarion. And I'm sure this piece has been picked up as an opinion piece because that's what he does. He submits it all over the state, and a bunch of newspapers pick it up because, he's been writing for years on this. But here's what the opinion piece says. State cannot afford better schools and also big PFDs. So, right from the get-go that this is a pitch to basically sacrifice your PFD for more school funding. And this is a typical move on Persili's part. This is what he always talks about. He always talks about the big PFD, the supersized PFD, it's always about how big the PFD is. And never about how big the government spending is. Which is a big deal. And then he continues to perpetuate some of the other myths and, not myths, but falsehood. The misleading components of it. He does, he does start talking about how, 90% of the dollars in the state comes from two different sources, and that's the permanent fund draw and oil taxes and royalty. And that, again, I think that points out part of our major problem in this state is that we're dependent on just those two sources. That the permanent fund withdrawal is limited by law to protect the savings for future generations, which is, again, don't eat the seed corn. And oil revenues fluctuate with price, production, and profitability. So you've got these two kind of, one that's locked at a certain amount and the other one that's kind of inherently unstable. And he goes on to talk about how add those up for next year's budget with legislators and the governor will put together over the next few months, and there's enough to cover essential services, but not much else. He said the House majority has started working on legislation to spend an additional $300 million on schools next year. Now, here's what's interesting. He's soft selling this because it's almost $400 million. It's $376 million. But he rounds it down, which I find interesting. I find it interesting that he rounds it down because that is that's telling to me that he rounds it down to only $300 million. He said that's more than a 25% boost in state funding. That may sound like a lot, but the state funding formula has inched up only 2% over the past decade, while inflation has totaled almost 32%. Both of those statements are true, but you have to remember that he's only talking about the base student allocation. He's not talking about the one-time funding. If you look at this on a graph and you go back over the last 18 to 20 years, education funding has gone up 35% in the last 18 years. So while technically he's not lying, it is the art of the half-truth. They pick out the worst statistic they can find, that the BSA has inched up only 2% over the last 10 years. You notice they don't go back to 20 years ago because it has come up significantly from then. So they pick out the worst 10-year period. Then he soft sells and undersells the additional spend from $376 million to $300 million. I mean, you see how this all adds up? And of course, he uses all this math to basically show that the schools have been shorted. Now, not a single word in here about the educational achievements, the outcomes, what kind of product the schools are producing. But I can tell you that even if he had mentioned it, he would then blame the lack of funding on that outcome, not the system, not the way we do things, not anything else. It would be because we just didn't have enough money to make it happen. So he goes on to say, even if school supporters are able to win passage of a funding increase in the House and the Senate, they'll need to avoid an override or veto by the governor. He said, we just don't have enough money to pay both. Last year's budget paid out a $1,700 permanent fund. This year's spending plan can afford an increase in state funding for schools and maybe a dividend of about $1,000 to $1,200. Alaskans need to decide what is more essential, adequate school funding or a bigger PFD in the fall. Well, let me just say that adequate school funding is very amorphous. What is adequate school funding? The answer is it's never adequate. There's never enough. They always need more. And what does better for the families and the income earners and the folks who are out there working? What does better than that? How far could a PFD go to help Alaska families? I mean, that's a big question. It's a big question for me. Well, the legislature seems to have finally read the room, and the Senate, at least, has now rejected the pay raise that was proposed by the State Officers Compensation Commission. That 3 of 5 member panel, there's only 3 members. It's a 5-member panel, but there's only 3 of them on there right now, including Lynn Gaddis and Jomo Stewart. They made a recommendation that the salary for commissioners, the governor, the legislators, that it should go up next year and then be pegged to inflation every year thereafter. Now, this is after the legislature just got a 67% pay raise. Right? I mean, it just happened. And so they proposed it, and now the Senate has voted unanimously against that proposal. This is one of those weird things where if the commission recommends it and the legislature does nothing, it automatically goes into effect. Nobody votes on it, except for the commission, I guess. The commission votes to put it forward, but nobody votes on it. The only way to stop it is to pass a bill. Well, the Senate did so unanimously. And now they're passing it on to the House for the House to make a decision on it. Now, I think what's going to happen again is that the House and they can read the room and say, well, we're out of money. We can't do it. All these things. And we just got a big old pay bump of 67%. We'll worry about this later. I found it interesting that, Bert Stedman was like tagging stuff to the, where is Stedman's comment? It's not in this article. It's in another article. Basically saying tagging the cost of living index, a CPI, to this kind of annual payout is a monumental mistake, essentially. Now, this makes me ask the question, then why would you want to peg he said it really, it causes future budgeting challenges. Well, then why would you want to peg the BSA to an automatic increase of the CPI? Why would you want to, abdicate your responsibility as the budgeting body to have a say in what goes on there? To me, that's a huge question. That's a huge question. But right now, we'll have to see where it goes from here. As of this moment, It's 100% rejected by the Senate, but the House also has to concur on this, and we'll see what happens. It'll be another 2 years before this kind of proposal would come back out from the Officers Compensation Commission. Maybe by that time, maybe we will have forgotten and they'll get another pay raise on top of it. But right now, the average, the current legislator earns $84,000, plus almost all the members can claim up to $37,000 in per diem, and they all get between $8,000 and $12,000 in office expenses and moving and other things and all this non-taxable nonsense. It's a pretty significant chunk. All right, we're out of time. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay. Let's see what else you guys are got going on up here. Tubing, short-sighted. Welcome to Monday. Brian says they tried to move. Apparently, he had something to do with all that contaminated soil up at Eielson. They were trying to clean it up. And he said, try to get the railroad to move all that contaminated PFAS soil. They didn't seem all that interested in moving the soil. Makes me question their business model. Yeah, well, there you go. That is interesting. That's interesting. Their business model is, if we lose money, we'll just get more money from the state. That's their business model. That's what's going on right there. All right. 40% of her income in Alaska is from the head. Melissa says, my property taxes and my PFD pay for Fairbanks schools, but my children don't attend any events in any of the schools. I mean, that happened for a long time. Rob says, so long as the permanent fund is the primary source of state revenue, our schools will continue to be poor quality. Yeah. Wow. Anthony said, in this scenario, which was PFD or kids' education, I vote for more money and dumb kids. We're already 53rd in the nation. Might as well take that last step towards the Kandahar gold standard of education and be able to afford at least to eat. Wow. Wow. Even with inflation from the last decade, says Rob, we're still spending about 25% more per student after adjusting for inflation than they were when he was in school in 2000. Anybody can look at the numbers and see the curve. It's going up and up and up. And yet the education scores are going down and down and down. And the attendance scores are going down and down and down. And yeah. Cindy says, I want to see adequate results in education before I start talking about adequate spending. Yeah, you want to talk about adequate funding? How about adequate outcomes? How about adequate achievements? Not asking for splendid, just adequate. Just middle of the pack. Just not 51st out of 53. That's what we're asking for. Yeah. KFAR cut out on me because I ran long and I wasn't looking at the clock. That's why. My bad. Yeah. Let's hear some chatter about the 1 hour Elam Town Hall at the Rec Center. Is it happening? When is it happening? Oh, Cindy said, Bill Elam's town hall on Saturday was interesting to hear what accountability meant to people. One teacher didn't want parents to have school choice and said kids should be in buildings. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, does that surprise you? That a teacher would believe that they don't want you to have choice, that they want a captive audience. I mean, like any business would like to have a captive audience. That's not that shocking, to be honest with you. Not that shocking. Oh. Okay. Let me close a few windows here to see. I got too many windows open. Let me close a few of these. Where is that quote from that quote from Stedman? I thought it was a good quote. I wanted to save it for later because it was because the way he said it made me go, okay, well then maybe we should start talking about not pegging the BSA to the salary. Oh, I know where it was. It was over here, right here. Senator Bert Stedman argued against indexing salaries, stating it leads to uncontrolled budgeting. Yeah. You don't index salary. You shouldn't index a lot of things because it leads to uncontrolled budgeting. That's 100% accurate. And if you abdicate control of the power of the purse, which is one of the few things that the legislature has going for it, that's part of the problem. All right. Let's go. We got to jump into it. Hour 2 is right now. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to hour 2 of the Michael Dukes Show. We are ready, willing, and able to tackle the tough news of the day today. We've finished up. We talked in the last hour about the potential for the federal government to try and push forward a gas pipeline project. We talked a little bit about funding and schools and the PFD and more. And we're going to continue some of those discussions here as we go through. We're also going to open up the phone lines here for hour 2. If you would like to sound off, I'll throw the lines open right now at 319-527-3864, 319-527-3864. If you would like to participate in the discussion today, feel free to dial us up and let's talk about it. I found the quote from Senator Bert Stedman about he was talking specifically about this pay raise, this proposed pay raise from the State Officers Compensation Commission, which was unanimously rejected by the Senate. It was unanimously rejected. And Senator Stedman said something that I thought was interesting. He said he argued against indexing salaries because part of the proposal was to tag the salary increases to the consumer price index, basically to peg it to inflation. He argued against indexing salaries, stating that it leads to uncontrolled budgeting, to which I agree. Which, again, is ironic that that's what's happening over and over and over again. We're hearing the same argument being made for the new base student allocation, is that it needs to be pegged to inflation. The problem is that in doing so, you abdicate your responsibility as a legislator. The legislature has the power of the purse and appropriation. And it's doing the same thing that Congress has done, where they basically just write a blank check and they let all the so-called experts write the rest of the bills, or that you're giving up a huge part of your power and responsibility. But see, what they're doing also is they're giving up culpability. It's not my fault. It's just the formula, right? So now they can't be blamed necessarily for it. But I thought Senator Rob Myers makes a very valid point when he talks about, when we're talking about pegging things to inflation and the indexing. He says when your primary revenue source tends to track opposite of inflation, and that would be the permanent fund. The permanent fund itself, it tends to track opposite of inflation. Indexing your budget to inflation at that point is a double whammy. And he's not wrong. You want to create a problem fast, that's what you do. When your primary revenue source, in this case the permanent fund, it tracks opposite of where inflation goes. When inflation is high, the fund doesn't do as well. Indexing your budget to that inflation is the literal double whammy. But it's not going to stop them from trying. And it's not going to stop them from trying to consolidate the earnings reserve and the corpus of the fund together. That's the next play that we've talked about here on the program repeatedly. That's the next play from many in the legislature. It should be it'll be interesting to see. All right. What else is on the agenda? So the state Senate has unanimously voted to reject the pay raise, and it's expected that the House will pick up that bill, and or they have their own bill apparently, and it's going to pass as well. So it looks like they at least read the room and said, okay, they're going to pitch that to the side. So we'll see what happens with that. Some of the other stories that we have right now, there was an executive order on Friday, kind of a Firearms Friday executive order, if you will. Thank you, President Trump. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the new some of the other test numbers. We got some breakdowns here on these testing numbers for kids, and they are they're kind of shocking. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. They're kind of shocking. And I can already see the blood in the water for folks who are crying, well, the reason that they're so bad is because we didn't have enough money and you haven't kept up, and that's why our outcomes are bad. Although, again, Rob Myers will point out that when we were spending more than any other state in the nation, back in 2015, when we had the highest per student spend, we were still in the toilet. We were still in the bottom of the pack. I don't think this is a money issue. I think something is fundamentally flawed in our education system. And it could be a variety of things. I mean, I think the teachers are trying their darndest to make all this work. But you've got a massive amount of overhead. You've got duplication of effort with all these different school districts and all these different, multiplicity of superintendents and et cetera, et cetera. You've got healthcare pools that aren't combined or conjoined. They should be all combined together. There's so many different things. You've got curriculum, that revolving curriculum that they come in and they go out every 2 or 3 years. It's a new curriculum to the tune of millions of dollars and confusion from the students and the teachers. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but something is fundamentally broken in the system. And I think that's pretty obvious from the outcomes that we're seeing right now. But I guess maybe we won't see, but we'll pay attention to that. We'll see where that goes here when we dive into some of these numbers and some of these news, some of the news. But let's talk about Doge. Now, over the weekend, we learned a lot more about the national Doge. We learned that a lot of people are in a panic. A lot of people are in a panic about what's going on with Doge. Now, I personally think that a lot of the rhetoric and things that we heard about from the national level Doge is people being scared that the gravy train's about to end. I really do. This whole thing about how, the Doge team has got access to all of our information. It shouldn't happen that way. And even the Treasury Secretary doesn't have. I don't think they're looking at my spending habits, right? I think they're looking at what are the spending habits of the agencies. Could they access my data? Probably. But could they access my data without the government's blessing? Probably. I mean, these are all genius level kids that Musk has surrounded himself with. They keep going on and on about how young these guys are, and they're 19 to 25 or 26 or something. But they're all like genius level IQ, and they are dedicated. Since election day, they showed up at the Department of the Treasury at 3:00 on the 21st of January. And they've been working something like 120 hours a week. They're essentially sleeping on couches in the offices of these buildings as they get into the systems and they start analyzing the spending. And they take their AI analytics and they're looking at where all the spending is going and everything else. That's why this USAID thing is blown up so big, because they started tracing payments and patterns, and that's what they're doing. They're applying AI to the spending to look for patterns that the normal human eye wouldn't see, right? That's what they're doing. And that's where all this information is coming out. So Doge is, the pucker factor in Washington, D.C. right now is very high, because I think they're seeing that all of a sudden, had any of you heard of USAID before last week, 10 days ago, whenever the story first broke? I had not heard about them. I did not know who USAID was. I was not familiar with the organization. Were you? No? Well, that obviously is part either working as intended or part of the problem. USAID, there are some of the stuff that came out about what USAID is doing is amazing. We were spending $2 million. We were giving $2 million, or was it 2 million or 2 billion, to the BBC for more even-handed coverage on Libya. They had an LGBT empowerment program in Serbia. They had, USAID is, $18 billion in economic development is what USAID spent in fiscal year 25. They funded drug production in Afghanistan, medical supply boondoggle. They promised the Global Health Supply Chain Program that it would almost pay for itself. It was a multi-billion-dollar investment, the largest in USAID history, was supposed to improve target countries' ability to obtain medical supplies so that USAID wouldn't have to fund something like it again. It never happened. that only 7% of shipments were completed in full 3 years into the project. By the middle of year 5, they happily reported over 80% of the shipments were on time, even though the average time had more than doubled. They ended up extending the contract with the main contractor by 2 years and almost $2 billion. They did covert warfare during the Cold War. You start to peel into this and you're like, who is USAID? So Doge is doing some of the work, right? That they are doing some of the work right here and exposing some of this stuff. And, you know, the head that sticks up above the crowd is the one that gets nailed in the face with a tomato, right? The nail that sticks up is the one that gets hammered down. And that's what they're trying to do. Turns out one of the Doge team was doxxed by a Washington Post or New York Times, Washington Post reporter, as saying some hateful and hurtful things back in the day on his Twitter feed or whatever. And it was about integrated marriages and something about hating Indians from India, not American Indians, but Indian Indians. And JD Vance, who is, he's got a stake, got some stake in this, said, we should, people say stupid things and it shouldn't destroy somebody's life over it. Then it turns out that the reporter that was reporting on this was actually had some kind of financial ties to USAID. I mean, there's some connectivity there. It's just, the whole thing is, all right. The reason that I got into all this is because I'm just amazed at what's going on. And when you read the list of things that we've been paying for as American taxpayers that we probably shouldn't have, including transgendered operas in Peru, or wherever, you just start going, okay, that none of that makes sense. Well, it looks like we're going to try and get a Doge in Alaska. Now, unfortunately, this is not an official government position. The initiative was conceptualized, according to Must Read Alaska, by Jamie Allard, who has recruited Alaska citizens dedicated to the same lean government principles as the Department of Governmental Efficiency that's working on behalf of Donald Trump. In her capacity as a citizen and not in her job as a representative, Allard has brought on several people as the founding members of the group, including Kathy Tilton, Bob Griffin, who we've had on this program. He's a former member of the Alaska Board of Education. Craig Campbell, former lieutenant governor. Lauren Lehman, former lieutenant governor. Dan Sullivan, no, not the senator, the former mayor of Anchorage, Dan Sullivan. Jordan Harari, and Anna London, Suzanne Downing, Portia Erickson, Sammy Graham, Jordan Schuster, and herself. The group is going to be researching and encouraging others to research waste, fraud, and misuse of public funds in Alaska, and the findings will be reported to the public. They have no role in the administration of the government or the governors or the legislature or any place else, but they are hoping to be able to do from the outside what Elon Musk is doing from the inside. Now, this should be interesting. They've got a website. It's doge-alaska.com. Doge, D-O-G-E, -alaska.com. Should make for some interesting reading to see what they find. I'm a little confused about what's going on outside with this whole Doge thing. I'm excited, but I also know that they're about to get a full court press from every bureaucratic agency that they could find to try and shut them down, because nobody wants to stop that federal gravy train. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. All right. I'm still reading about this judge that was like, even the Treasury Secretary doesn't see Treasury Department data. Well, maybe that's part of the problem. That's part of our problem right there, for sure. All right. Cite your sources, Harold. Shuttering U.S. aid is crushing U.S. farmers and ranchers. U.S. How is it crushing U.S. farmers and ranchers? My God, the talking points. All right. I'm scrolling backwards here to see what you guys have been talking about. Okay. If the curriculum changes every 3 years, says Frank, he's quoting somebody else. He said, if the quote curriculum change every 3 years, they just start to learn one, then change it, quote, are these students, as I was, taking 2 to 3 years to pass the same grade? How does the curriculum change affect students as they graduate yearly? Yeah. Donna says, when I was talking about Stedman, he goes, perhaps Stedman is not in favor of HB 69. I don't think he is. From what I've been reading, he's not a fan. But that's another reason why they put him out to pasture as that's why they put him on the capital budget instead of the operating budget, because they knew he is not a fan of that kind of stuff. So he's not going to have, I don't think he's going to have the opportunity there. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Word on the street. Okay, I don't care. Many teachers don't want to see more money, said Jeannie. They want to see cuts that favor student success. I don't know. I'm reading through your comments as I'm trying to read them here. I mean, I'm trying to read them out loud as I read through them. He says, Harold says, tell me the show is in denial without telling me the show is in denial. The Doge is about to strike Alaska big time. Okay. It is what it is, Harold. You can't keep spending all this money on nonsense and expect that it's all going to be okay, even if there is a short-term pain. Sorry. That's even if it is. Curriculums. People are talking about curriculums. But will they finally audit the Fed? Asked Brian. That's a question. No, never heard of U.S. aid, said Chris. Rick said he'd heard of it, but he had no knowledge of what it did. Yeah. Bill, that's a good piece of news. Starlink announced yesterday that they're ready to turn your cell phone into a satellite phone. Works with any carrier. Ooh, hello. All that nonsense is false, said Harold. I'm sure he was talking about all the things that they're spending money on. Yeah. Again, how... Oh, that's right. That's right. He mentioned that last week, and I didn't see the shows, but he talked about USAID in the past with charts and everything. All right, we gotta go here. I'm still scrolling. I got plenty of comments left. This is a right-wing extremist group, Harold. Yes, and you're welcome to leave at any time. That's all I'm saying. If you want to leave, feel free to do so. Nobody got time for your stuff. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Anthony's not wrong. Anthony said, Alaska's pretty transparent with their ridiculous lack of financial responsibility and spending under the dig deeper into the hole you're standing in phase. Not sure anyone's going to be really surprised with what Alaska Doge finds. Yeah. Not surprising. Not surprising. With where this stuff goes. I don't know what they'll find. I mean, whatever they do find, they won't have any teeth, so I doubt much will come of it other than that they'll shine the light on the waste. But let's face it, many people don't care about the waste. It doesn't affect them directly, or so they think. And so they'll be okay. And then there are some people who are just fine with supporting ridiculous things like, again, the transgendered opera in wherever, or the Serbian LGBTQ thing they'll be fine with that. Spending taxpayer. How does that forward American foreign policy? I don't know that it does. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see what they dig up. We'll keep an eye on it as well. Meanwhile, Congressman Nick Begich continues to move ahead. Remember back when he was running, how Mary Peltola ran that big campaign against him, and was it Mary or was it the PAC? I think it was actually Peltola. It was one of the two, but I think it was Peltola was running those ads saying that he was going to end Social Security. Nick Begich will end Social Security. Remember that? And instead, he's trying to end the federal income tax on Social Security benefits. The Senior Citizens Tax Elimination Act, H.R. 1040, would eliminate federal income tax on Social Security benefits. The bill seeks to relieve middle-class seniors from what Begich describes as unjust double taxation on their retirement income. Peltola, as on the opposite side of that, advocated for higher taxes on Social Security when she was in office, and he favors lower taxes. Begich is quoted in Must Read as saying, "After years of poor returns, the least we could do is make sure we end the practice of unjust double taxation on retirees. The money paid into Social Security belonged to those who paid into the system. As I made clear during the campaign, making sure that retiree programs like Social Security are protected from federal bureaucrats is a top priority." Now, this is not anything really, this would really be returning it to the status quo, because prior to 1984, Social Security benefits were exempt from federal income tax. But there's been legislation introduced over the years that had a phased taxation system where a portion of the Social Security benefits became taxable as an individual's income increased above a certain threshold. So you've already been taxed on it once, and now you're going to be taxed on it again. Now, the bill's prime sponsor is one of my favorite Congress critters, Thomas Massie, who is from Kentucky's 4th Congressional District. Massie recognized Begich in a tweet on X saying, "Thank you to Nick Begich for co-sponsoring H.R. 1040. This bill assists middle-class seniors by eliminating the unjust double tax on Social Security benefits." And I think this is great. Nick has been doing some amazing stuff out there, staying busy. He's on all these different committees. 8 different subcommittees now and everything else. He's put forward this. He is moving and shaking. Let's hope he can keep this momentum up right now. But I mean, this idea that somehow Social Security money that you've already been taxed on, and then you're going to be, it's that double, it never made sense. The double taxation on that never made sense to me. Well, and apparently to most people prior to 1984, because that's when it started to happen. But this would reverse that. So we'll see where HR 1040 goes here in the new future. Finally, for this segment here, before we run out of time, on Friday, after Firearms Friday, why did you have to do that? Come on, Don. You could have put this out a little earlier. We would have had something fun to talk about on Friday. The president unveiled an executive order at the White House on Friday, directing federal agencies to review all regulations and policies that may have infringed upon Second Amendment rights since Biden took office in January of 2021. Why did you have to make it so narrow? You should have just said all federal agencies to review all policies and regulations that may have infringed on the Second Amendment, full stop, period. Right? You could have stopped right there. But he's just focusing on Biden. Okay, all right. You got to give it some guide rails. I understand. The executive order reads, the president says, the Second Amendment is an indispensable safeguard of security and liberty. It has preserved the right of American people to protect ourselves, our families, and our freedoms since the founding of our great nation. Because it is foundational to maintaining all other rights held by Americans, the right to keep and bear arms must not be infringed. So under this directive, Attorney General Pam Bondi has 30 days to conduct an extensive review of all actions, regulations, and agreements enacted between January 2021 and January 2025 that could potentially impede Americans' right to bear arms. And then she'll present a proposed plan of action to the president in coordination with the domestic policy advisor. I have no idea who the domestic policy advisor is, but it sounds fancy. So the key areas of focus will include presidential and agency actions that may have restricted Second Amendment rights. Okay, there's a few of those I could think of. Department of Justice and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives regulations affecting firearms and federal firearms licensees, FFLs. Well, maybe they'll take the FFLs out of the crosshair and stop with this nonsensical zero tolerance policy for any kind of paperwork errors or violations. One of the other key areas will be the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention reports and policies. Again, I think they should turn the Office of Gun Violence Prevention into the Office of Second Amendment Protection. But that's just me. They'll also review agency policies on firearms and ammunitions classifications. They will review the efficiency of federal processing for firearm-related applications, including manufacturing, transfer, and export license. And one of the big ones that we talked about last Friday for Pam Bondi, especially as the new Attorney General, is that they will examine and review the government's legal position in ongoing and potential litigation regarded and related to gun rights. So these cases that are either pending litigation or pending the potential for appeal or something else, they're going to go through all that stuff. And this is where the rubber meets the road, folks. And we'll pull this apart a little bit more on Firearms Friday, but this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. Does the president stand up and support and make good on his promises that he made over the last 4 years to gun rights advocates across the country? It looks like he's going to, and I'm excited about it. But we're going to have to see what comes out. Once Bondi submits the proposed plan, the domestic policy advisor will work closely with the Department of Justice to finalize and implement measures to reinforce Second Amendment protections, which would likely roll back regulations implemented under the Biden administration and return to constitutional boundaries on government's interference with the public's right to bear arms. Well, you can only hope. You could only hope that this would be the beginning of something like that, because this is not strictly a Biden problem. I mean, I know that we're kind of pushing back against Biden because he had some egregious stuff, but this is not simply a Biden problem. This was a problem under Obama. This is a problem under Trump. He put the bump stock ban in. This is a problem under George W. Bush. This is a problem that's been going on for years. So starting with the Biden era, that's a good start. But I would love to see them go back and look at all of the infringements upon the Second Amendment since 1934. U.S. v. Miller. That's where I'd like you to start and work your way forward from there. But I mean, this is a good start. Hats off, tip of the hat to the president on this. Looks like he's trying to deliver on that promise, and that makes me a happy camper as far as that goes. That's some good stuff right there. All right, final segment ahead. We're going to talk about these education scores and some of the stats and statistics around them. This is the thing that they don't want you to talk about. The folks who are all this pro-education spend, they don't want to talk about the outcomes. They just want to pay us the money and shut up, is what they're basically saying. You want to sound off on this? 319-527-3864, The Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Brian says, geez, you have a hard-on for that bump stock ban. Yeah, I mean, anytime you infringe on the rights, I get a little upset about it. You're right. You know, you're right. I do get a little bit focused when you infringe upon my rights. You're remembering that. Going backwards here to see what you guys have been talking about. Yeah, Nick was the speaker temporary. Yeah, I saw that he was speaker pro tem. I saw that. That was cool. I'm still scrolling backwards here. I don't think, Brian says, I don't think USAID is getting shuttered. Administratively, it might get moved. The only people who really should care about it are people who are in favor of waste and fraud. Yeah. Judges need to stay in their lanes. That's because you're a radio host and not a seasoned diplomat. Never claimed to be a seasoned diplomat. Wouldn't want to be a seasoned diplomat. It's an article crying for Cargill and other mega farms getting money from taxpayers sending food over. So the $2 billion that's not being spent by USAID to send food to other nations, well, the good news is that might drop prices for food for us because there'll be a surplus. Out of line. Reagan began taxing Social Security. That was 1984. Yeah, he signed off on it. It's one of the, again, there's a few things that Reagan did that definitely I'm not a fan of, and that is one of them right there. Does the congressional budget make sense? Yeah, okay. Don't bring up the bump stock comment regarding Trump. It's getting old. Thank you. Well, he didn't make a comment on the bump stocks. He made a comment on the red flag laws. And I won't stop talking about it. So feel free to spin the dial if that's what's going to bother you. And we're only talking about it today, instead of Friday, because it came out on Friday after the show. So I wanted to talk about it. I'm going through here. Bump stocks are worthless for normal people. Yes, I understand. I totally agree. They're a novelty item. I don't own one. I've never owned one. Don't even care to own one. But it's an infringement. That bothers me. And it should bother you too. But, if it doesn't, that's okay. I'm going through here. Michael, prior to the bump stock ban, which has since been lifted, had you used a bump stock? I used a bump stock like many, many years ago at a range. Somebody had one and I shot it and it was interesting, but it wasn't something that I cared to. I mean, I don't want one. It's a novelty item. That's what it is. It's a novelty item. You can essentially do the same thing without the bumps, without the stock. If I've done the same thing with my own rifles. Hook a finger in a belt loop and just pull against it, and you got a bump, you can do it. But again, it's not effective. It's a novelty. It's for entertainment purposes only. But again, any infringement is a problem for me, whether I agree with the use of the item or not. I don't use bipods, but if they outlawed bipods, I'd have a problem with it. I don't use reset triggers, but if they did, I would have a problem with it. Right? It's not something whether I use it or not. Does it infringe? That's the problem. Reagan did away with the Fairness Act. That's the Fairness Doctrine. That's the equal time doctrine is what Harold's talking about. He says the rise of progressive radio and media programming will eventually crush right-wing extremism. Yeah, that's worked out so well for Air America and all those other ones. You've already got your progressive radio and media. It's called CNN. It's called MSNBC. It's called Fox. I mean, you've got your share. The alternative media is here to stay, Harold. They tried it. It failed miserably. But, don't feed the trolls, Dukes. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay. So this was interesting, and this came out on Friday, and because we were doing Firearms Friday, didn't get a chance to really talk about it, but it is an interesting kind of dissection of the academic achievement scores in the state of Alaska. Now, one of the things that that the folks who are pushing so hard for this funding update for the base student allocation, for this increase in school funding, is that they don't want to talk about policy. They don't want to talk about outcomes. They don't want to talk about, they don't want to talk about any of that stuff. All they want is their money. That's what they're saying. Give us the money, shut up. The policy debate is a separate debate. It's totally separate. Just give us the money and then we can talk about it. I mean, it's almost like they're holding somebody hostage. Give us the money, then we'll talk about it. It's essentially what's going on. So these test scores, Corrine Smith over at the Alaska Beacon has got two different stories. One, the headline reads, Alaska students continue to struggle in math and reading according to the nation's report card. And then it goes on to talk about the test scores are fueling political debate on the future of schools. Governor Dunleavy repeatedly referenced the report card on education a week ago Friday. He repeatedly referenced the NEEP scores in talking about the increase for school funding. He said, and I quote, if those scores don't motivate the discussion about policy, I don't know what will, to be honest with you. It shows that 4th and 8th grades tested 51st out of 52 or 53 jurisdictions in 3 of 4 categories for math and reading. Literally the bottom of the pack for all of those. Now, there are some who say, well, the chart, because governor's talking about charter schools, right? It was one of the things that he wanted to talk about as part of his policy decision is charter schools. He said he referenced a previous study on NEEPs on charter schools in Alaska, which ranked Alaska at the top. And that was the reason why he wants to expand charter schools in the state. Because if they're doing well, and they're doing so, then we should emulate that, right? We should be able to duplicate that. That would be a good thing. But then, of course, they go on to say, how to interpret the charter school test score study has been a point of contention. A recent study by Fairbanks High School teacher Beth Zerbies and NAACP of Anchorage volunteer Mike Bronson reached the conclusion that the scores reflect the school's socioeconomic characteristics rather than showing that the schools are more effective. So because the schools are made up of students who are apparently better socioeconomically, that's why they did well, as compared to, which to me is kind of like, are we just picking stuff based on, for some reason they can't? Is it the kids? Is the kids are incapable? Is that what you're saying? Or are they doing something different with the kids in the classroom? Would the same model work with kids from a lower socioeconomic class if they were held to the same standards as the kids that are currently in the charter school? Would they have the problem with discipline and some of the other things? Would they be able to get through to those kids? But their argument is that Alaska charter schools students more closely resemble private school students than other states. And they actually said that the NEEP has always been a civil rights tool. I didn't realize that. But let's look at the actual numbers and talk about the actual statistics from the nation's report card, the National Assessment of Education Progress. It's a test that was mandated by Congress, which evaluates students' proficiency in reading, math, science, and writing. So students are selected at random for the test as a representative sample of their state. So they take the test, everybody takes the test, and then they pull a random sampling from the test. They're conducted every 2 years, and they're administered to 4th, 8th, and 12th grade students. And this latest test score report was released at the end of January 29th. So here are some of the raw numbers. In 2024, Alaska's 4th and 8th grade students showed no significant progress from the 2 years previously in math or reading, continuing a general downward trend for over the last 20 years. This has been going on. This declining achievement has been going on for 20 years in the state of Alaska. Now, remember, in 2015, not too long ago, not 9-10 years ago, we were the number one spend per capita on students in education in the country. But this is a 20-year downward trend. Going back all the way to the Palin administration, what was that, 2005, 2006, 2007? They had a 74% graduation rate, meaning 1 in 4 flunked out. 10 years after that, they'd increased it a whopping 3%. It was now just over 76%. This has been a problem for 20 years. At fourth grade reading, almost half, or 47% of students, scored at or above the basic reading level in 2024. The average score for fourth grade reading was 202. That's lower than the national average of 214 out of 500, putting Alaska below most of the nation at 51st out of 52 U.S. jurisdictions in reading for fourth graders. That includes the 50 states, including the District of Columbia and the Department of Defense operated schools. New Mexico was the only jurisdiction with a lower score than we were. For eighth grade reading, 57% of students score at or above basic level, which was a decline from just 2 years ago when it was 63%. We've fallen even further. 22% scored at or above proficient, also a decline from 26%. The average Alaska eighth graders reading score was 246, below the average of 257. Again, 51st in the nation, just ahead of New Mexico. For math, fourth grade students scored slightly better. 64% scoring at or above the NEAT basic. Scores were not significantly different than 2 years ago. The average score was 226, below the national average of 237, ranking us at 51st out of 53, ahead of New Mexico and Puerto Rico. For eighth grade math, 54% of students scored above the NEAT basic. Scores declined since 2022, when 59% of the students were at that level. The average math score was 264, below the national average of 272, a decline. We're now ranked 43rd out of 53 nationwide. These are the numbers that they don't want to talk about. They don't want to be faced with this, because again, this is not a one-year thing. This is a trend. It's been going on. When you look at where we've been spending the money and how we've been spending the money, there's no correlation in what's going on. The reading decline is especially concerning. I mean, how you can get through life without, it's especially concerning. The Peggy Carr, who's the commissioner of the National Center for Educational Statistics, says the nation's report card is not good, right? We're not seeing the progress we need to regain the ground our students lost during the pandemic. She said that low reading proficiency is really concerning. She emphasized the lower performance level is not just due to lapses during COVID. Reading scores have been declining since 2017. This is a problem. Why is reading performance dropping? And you wonder, is there a correlation between that and the number of students who are leaving brick and mortar schools and going to a secondary model, whether it's homeschooling or charter schools or some kind of distance learning or something else? Do you think that there may be a correlation there? Because what you're doing is not working. There is something fundamentally broken in our system of education. And you could see it in the report cards. You could see it in the NEAP. You could see it in all these things. And you could see it in the free market as people decide to leave the system. That's the biggest indicator. When the parents who are really engaged and who care about what's going on with their kids and have a choice, make that choice and exercise it, that is the biggest indicator that something is fundamentally broken in what's going on. And they believe that it can't be fixed, so they're going to go find an alternative. Throwing more money at this is not going to solve it. We've got to admit first that there is a problem before we move forward. And it's not a funding problem. It's something else. All right. We got more coming up tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. The Michael Duke Show continues. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you then. Have a great day. Okay. Well, it's frustrating. Again, this is not a 1 year issue. It's not a funding issue. It's been going on for 20 plus years. And I've been saying this for years. Something is fundamentally broken. That there's just something's broken. Charter schools do better because of the parents who are engaged and who want to be part of it. That's another reason why. There's no reason why, if parents were engaged, they couldn't demand some of these changes. But again, it takes that engagement. It takes more. And what they're doing is they're just voting with their feet instead. That's part of the problem. They're just like, okay, they're pulling out because they don't see a solution, because the system is rigged to perpetuate itself, and it doesn't want to hear. It doesn't want to hear that something's broken in the system. It thinks everything's fine. It just needs more money. That's part of the problem. And because they're not willing to listen to anything else other than we need more money, the parents are like, why should we fight this? Why are we fighting this? We'll just pull our kids out and go do something else. I mean, this whole argument about if only we had more money, we'd deliver a better product. You've been getting more money. You've been getting a ton of more money. Is it going where it belongs? Is it going into the classrooms? Or is it going into overhead and infrastructure and administration? How many administrators do you have per classroom teacher now compared to what it was 30 years ago? Why aren't you pooling your healthcare pools? Why aren't you consolidating districts or buildings? Why are we looking for efficiency? You know you've had a deficit for years, and yet you continue crying and saying it's because the state won't stand up and give us more money. Something is broken. And until we admit that, there's going to be no fixing this. No amount of money will fix this problem. Period. That's the deal. All right. Gotta go. See you guys. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.